a dog!
James Gunn's Superman releases in theaters on Friday, July 11th, and I have concerns. Based on the trailers that we have seen so far, Superman seems to be a more emotional character than his traditional depiction in the comics. And while emotional characters can be very useful in storytelling, I would argue that Superman shines best when he has been properly set up for emotional moments. But that begs the question, what is the difference between an emotional moment and just being an emotional character? I am your host, Jacob. Join us as we discuss the difference between a good emotional moment and just being emotional and why it will matter this Friday. Before we begin though, I have recently learned that YouTube has been changing its algorithm slowly but surely over the last 18 months to push viewers towards channels backed by large media companies. You may have noticed a shift in your feed. It might be pushing you to these bigger channels, these media-backed channels. It might have even been showing you channels that aren't backed by media, but the videos are like 10 plus years old and they just have a really big viewership. That's because of the shift in the algorithm that they have produced. And what this is causing is smaller to medium-sized channels that aren't backed by media companies being squeezed out. So if you are interested in this content, if you like what I'm doing, likes and comments, they still help, but the best way to support our channel is going to be to send this to someone that you think will like it as well. That way we just bypass the algorithm altogether and you can help support the growth in channel, and not just my channel. Any channel out there that isn't backed by a media company, if you want to support them, share their videos with other people. That's how you're going to help them best. So there you go. Thank you in advance for doing that, and let's get back to the video. What do we mean when we say an emotional moment? Put simply, it is a scene in which a character displays a significant emotional response to something that has happened in the plot. These displays can either be moments of positive emotions like joy or excitement, or negative emotions like sadness, fear, or, most frequently, anger. No matter which emotion is being exhibited, however, they tend to have more impact on an audience if the character is normally in control of their feelings. I don't mean that the character never displays emotion. Pretty much every non-robot character being played by an actor with at least an average charisma score will show appropriate amounts of feelings throughout a movie or video game. But in the really impactful emotional moments, the levels of those feelings will noticeably spike. Many times, this will be when a character is caught by surprise by a perceived threat or complication of some kind. But my favorites tend to be when a character has been put under an increasing amount of stress and simply cannot take anymore. These tend to result in emotional outbursts that give an audience an opportunity to see and connect with the character's humanity. Think Aragorn in the Twin Towers when he, Gimli, and Legolas arrive at the Uruk-hai camp and believe that Pippin and Meriadoc have been killed. These guys have been running themselves ragged trying to save the lives of their friends, only to suddenly find out that they have died, leading to Aragorn kicking a helmet and screaming in anguish. Though this might have been because Viggo Mortensen did actually break his foot on impact with the helmet. Later in the movie though, we get a moment where Legolas is being a bit of a Debbie Downer, and Aragorn has to let him know that he cannot deal with his negativity any longer. And who can blame him? He's been traipsing around Middle-earth looking for foolish hobbitses, rescued a king who immediately decides to lock him into a fortress with no escape, get run over and dragged off a cliff, nearly drown in the river, make his way back to the fortress from which there is no escape, realize the men he is meant to fight with are either too old or too young, and then hear Legolas complaining about the situation that he already knows is foobar. I too would need to release the pressure, and it is exactly this very human outburst that allows the audience to better connect with the story and what the character is experiencing. But I ask you, would that moment have connected as much if Aragorn was always showing that emotion? I would argue no, I don't think it would. And here I want to reiterate that being emotional is more than just having feelings, but the tendency to let anyone and everyone know about those feelings at every moment. It's not that emotional characters can't have these really strong moments where they exhibit even more emotion than normal. They can. But it takes an exceptional amount of on-screen charisma and energy to let the audience know that this is really a turning point for them. at least compared to a character who is usually more in control of their emotions, and can convey that same level of impact with less energy. In fact, I'd argue that when emotional characters finally shut up about their feelings, you know something has hit them especially hard. Ryven realizing that Captain Miller has died at the end of Saving Private Ryan is a good example of this. An additional example of an emotional character is Anakin Skywalker in Attack of the Clones. Anakin is a moody teenager dealing with a lot of feels, and he has no hesitation in letting us know about it. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, emotional characters can add a lot to the narrative depending on the story you are trying to tell, and the other characters involved in it. Anakin is consistently shown as an immature young man forced into situations that he is not emotionally prepared for. This is both a narrative consequence of Qui-Gon Jinn dying in the previous movie, and development for the tragedy that is Anakin's character arc. So, when Anakin gets these strong emotional moments where he murders the Sand People, and then screams at Padme, they aren't necessarily uncalled for outbursts, as much as they are just consistent evidence of immaturity. And immaturity and lack of self-discipline that is important for the story to show. In contrast, the Anakin we see in Revenge of the Sith has matured quite a bit. He's still struggling with his emotions, but he isn't having an outburst every 5 minutes of screen time. He advocates for patience when trapped suddenly, doesn't kill Dooku immediately until influenced by Palpatine in the opening duel, and seeks help from his elders in dealing with his nightmares. His first real outburst occurs when he is not granted the rank of Master, but it is brief and he is able to get control of it pretty quickly. It's not until he is forced to choose between letting Palpatine die or saving him that the dam building up inside him breaks. Then, after everything he has done and everything he has sacrificed for his wife, the thought of her betraying him sets him off, once more completing the tragedy. Setting aside the bad writing and the slight overacting by Hayden Christensen, this is an emotionally charged moment for a character that, at least in this film, has been keeping a handle on his emotions fairly well. Not quite as well as Halo's Master Chief, of course, but much better than he did in the previous movie. And speaking of Master Chief, let's talk about him a little, because this is a fairly critical video and I want to. Chief is an example of a truly stoic character. He shows a minimal amount of emotion no matter the situation. That is why the scene in Halo Infinite where the pilot is freaking out and Chief opens up to him works so well. Fernando Esparza is an emotional character, and by this point in the story, any level of control he had over his fear is gone. But this scene gives Chief the opportunity to connect with the pilot and tell him that he isn't exactly doing great either. And this is something important to notice too. Not every stoic character's emotional moment has to be an outburst of emotion. Sometimes it's just them acknowledging that they too are struggling and giving the audience a chance to understand what's going on beneath the surface. This is why having an emotional character in the story can be very valuable. In fact, I made a similar argument in a previous video over Paramount Plus's Halo show. They serve as excellent foils or supporting cast to protagonists that are normally in control of their emotions. But that's just the thing. Normally, the protagonist is the one in control of their emotions, and that is what leads us to my concerns over the new Superman movie. Superman has had some great emotional moments over the years. There are absolutely times when he gets pushed too far, and we see a glimpse of what Big Blue is capable of when he loses control. But those moments are typically few and far between, as they should be. If Superman was always emotional and always letting people know that, then he wouldn't be Superman. Given the power level of Superman, he must be in control. If he wasn't, then Lex Luthor would be right. He would be too dangerous to leave unchecked. He would represent an existential threat to all life on Earth. But because he can keep his emotions in check, we see him as this paragon of virtue and discipline, and it makes those moments when he does cut loose all the better. But the impression I get when I watch the trailers for the new Superman is that he is much more emotional than what we are used to. Sure, you get the scene where protesters are yelling and throwing things at him, and he just keeps walking. But you also get trailers where he gets exasperated with Lois because she questions his actions and doesn't immediately support every decision he makes in an interview. And the latest trailer we got last week shows him barging into Lex Luthor's office and destroying property over a dog. And now, don't get me wrong, I could 100% see this scene working in context. If they play up the idea that Crypto is his last remaining link to his homeworld, I can see this outburst being justified, but only if he is shown being in control the majority of the time. Otherwise, he's just an immature Anakin Skywalker, getting caught up in his feels and throwing a temper tantrum. And just to show that I'm being fair about this, let's look at another movie in which a dog is the catalyst for a whole lot of human deaths. Can you imagine if John Wick went around loudly expressing his feelings with everyone in his movie before killing them? It would not have been nearly as popular. What makes John Wick scary is that he is doing what he is doing while in control of his emotions. He is still angry. If he wasn't, there wouldn't be a movie. But he is always calm and calculating. And that, I would argue, is what would work better in this scene. Can you imagine if, instead of blasting through the door, Superman just calmly walked through with several security trying to hold him back? After realizing the futility, Lex ushers them out and sits smugly behind his desk, taunting Superman, who remains composed but obviously angry. Then, Lex gets one really good jab in about poor Crypto's possible fate, leading Superman to calmly pick Lex's desk up and set it down out of the way. Not walk around it, not smash it against the window, but just pick the whole thing up and set it down gently and walk through the space the desk used to be. I mean, talk about a power play. A smug Lex feeling like he is in the superior position behind his desk, only for Superman to literally and symbolically remove any obstacle keeping him from reaching Lex easily and without losing control of his emotions. That's when Superman is at his most intimidating. That's also when Lex loses the moral high ground, because his entire beef with Superman philosophically is that he cannot be trusted with the amount of power he has, because in Lex's mind, he is the one who should be looked at with awe, and he is the superior man. But if Superman can do the things he does while remaining uncorrupted and in control, then Lex loses. But I don't think that is what we are going to see in this movie based off the trailers. I think Superman is going to win the physical fight, but be too emotional to win the philosophical fight. Of course, though, only time will tell. It could absolutely be that these scenes make sense in context and that they do Superman justice. I just don't get that feeling from the trailers. And with that said, it is time for me to wrap up. Thank you so much for blessing the channel with your support today. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this video with anyone you think would enjoy it. I have been your host, Jacob, and I will see you in the next one.
Luckily, I'm not you, and I never will be.